Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Funbelt Podcast.
Funbelt Podcast.
Funbelt Podcast.
Funbelt Podcast.
It's just a great conference that is at a point right now where I think clearly the best group of five conference in the country.
The state of Sunbelt football is the strongest in our history.
And we got to continue to showcase what our league is about.
This league is insane.
Yeah, it might be like one of those 8 wonders of the world.
And you can see just what a great group of five conference it really is.
It's a big deal.
Boy, life is looking pretty good in the Sunbelt these days.
Dusty Thibodeau back for another episode of Funbelt Podcast. Joining me, Ben Moore from PantherTalk.com. Feel like I had to leave my home. I'm coming to you from an undisclosed location along the U.S.-Mexican border to make sure that I was safe. Because Ben, Chanda was going to come after me if Troy didn't win that semifinal conference game in the Sunbelt Conference Tournament to go to the finals. So I was proactive. I ran away. I am right at the Mexican border and ready to flee.
You had to bunker down, man. Folks in our listening audience don't get to see our video on a week-to-week basis, but her eyebrows were certainly raised when you said, "Hey, oh yeah, it's just a cakewalk." I think you may have used that term, and we know coaches, even when they know their squad is pretty good, they always get nervous. We know certainly at this mid-major level, it's win or go home, and the Trojans are marching on to the championship game tomorrow. So credit to her and her staff. And as we were talking before we started recording, I think that's probably their wake up call to get things to mash the gas pedal down, and we'll be playing on Monday night, which is what you want to do as a Sunbelt basketball team.
Definitely so, and then no surprise at all, it will be the Troy Trojans and UTA Mavs. Once again, Star Jacobs just dominating the game and leading her team there as they get ready to exit the Sunbelt Conference, looking for that one last Sunbelt Conference championship. It's going to be a great game tomorrow afternoon on the women's side, but on the men's side, what a shock that the Cajuns were able to be the ones to out the regular season champion Bobcats there in that quarterfinal round.
Yeah, we talked about it last week, didn't we? Texas State was just as likely to win the whole doggone thing as they were to stub their toe and do exactly like they did last season and lose in the first round. And really it was convincingly. Huge credit to Bob Marlin and his staff. I can tell you from talking to some folks over there, they were wondering if this was, the final salvo there for Bob Marlin in Lafayette. They've been so close for so many years, obviously broke through there in 2014 to go to the NCAA tournament, but it's been frustration after frustration. They've had very good teams. They've had teams that were just a little bit above 500. That team this season look good. They getting off the bus. Probably one of the biggest teams I saw live and in person this season, but just had a lot of flaws. And they played a tremendous game against Texas State. Really, punched them right in the mouth and just kept holding the gas pedal down. I think the lead was as high as 16 or 17 points in that ball game. So, very, very interested to see what they do tonight. They're of course the early game in the semifinals. But the Cajuns are in a good spot. And if you believe the Vegas odds makers, they are favored right now to make the championship game.
You got to wonder. So the Sunbelt Conference waits until the tournament to hand out the hardware there of the regular season championship game, Player of the Year awards. They got that right before going into that game against the Cajuns. Do you think that that's a good idea and that maybe that was maybe a distraction for that team?
It could be. I think the toughest part ultimately, we have to also think, it was a unique situation last year, going with the East and the West. Texas State only played the Western Division. You had so many games canceled last season. You could kind of blame some of that last season, but this is also, basically a first-year head coach because he took over, that interim case last season. He doesn't have a whole lot of folks that are used to the pressures of March per se. They did obviously have some players that were seniors and were, they were good. Just didn't play well. And, it's also the rest versus rust, right? You look back and say, all right, look at how well the teams played. They got to play the game on Thursday night in the Pensacola Bay Center, as opposed to the teams that certainly got their first. Were not good for the teams that just arrived there. No, Georgia State certainly in the late game, and Arkansas State, as well as Georgia Southern and at App State. App State did not, particularly start real great, but then picked it up in the second half there. So I think it is a factor, but it's another disappointing, one and done situation. But I guess if there's good news for the Sun Belt, as we talked about last week, there will be 2 teams playing in the postseason for the men's this season from the Sun Belt, as Texas State has already punched their ticket to the NIT. Of course, a bittersweet pill there to go and play in the NIT. And unfortunately for them, they're probably not going to play for at least another week. And plus, depending if they get that Tuesday or Wednesday when the NIT starts. So they'll have a lot of time to think about this one and stew on it and watch somebody else cut the nets down on Monday night.
I think Terrence Johnson, though, will use it as a learning moment to kind of take that pain of losing and really help motivate his team there into the postseason. And I think they'll make a good, deep NIT run. I really do. My only hope is that they're able to host a game so that when I return from exile, that I will be able to make a trip over to San Marcos to catch some postseason basketball. Overall, though, the Sun Belt Conference tournament, both men's and women's side, have been really good. I think the average margin of score was about 6 points of the games. The one game that was really kind of boring and ho-hum, that quarterfinal game there with Appalachian State, Georgia Southern, just Appalachian State dominated tip to tip and moving on to face Georgia State in the late round game. Ben, what are your picks there in the semifinals, starting with the Troy and Raging Cajun game?
Yeah, I'm really fascinated by that game. It's set to tip off here just after we'll get done recording here. Really intrigued by that matchup. As I mentioned, Louisiana is very, very big, very long. Scott Cross is really showing off to me, kind of showing his experience and his mettle, how much he's been able to really prod this Troy team along. They continue to get things done. Fascinating to see what happens there. I really do think it's a toss-up game. I will give the edge to Troy just simply because I think from a top to bottom, I think they probably have a bit more talent. And if they can slow down Jordan Brown in the middle, things will go well. But if they don't, and Jordan Brown goes and has another 30.8 board game, it could be the Cajuns moving on. But I like Troy close there in the early game, and the late game certainly has particular attention of mine. Looking forward to seeing Georgia State, the preseason top pick, and now one of the hottest teams in the country. I believe the incomparable Mike Holmes, SID for Georgia State, said that the Panthers currently have the 10th longest winning streak in the nation in Division I basketball right now at 8 games. So last year, these two teams faced each other in the Sun Belt tournament final. There is certainly revenge on the line. The Panthers went up to Boone and knocked off App State. I do expect them to knock off App State again, exercise those demons, and play for the title on Monday night.
I like Georgia State as well. I think that, as we've talked about, it's all a matter of who can be the hot team come March. They're definitely the hot team right now for March. So I think that their semifinal game against Appalachian State is not necessarily going to be a breeze for them, but I don't think that they'll sweat it as much as they potentially could. On the other side, the X factor is really Jamal Brown, and whether or not Jordan Brown, whether or not he can have another big game to lead the Cajuns. If he does, I think the Cajuns win. If not, it's going to be Troy in another close game as well. Setting that up, though, I got to go with Georgia State winning it all, just because they are the hot team right now.
Well, and the biggest thing too, we talked about this as well, but the experience. And I think that was the biggest thing that jumped out in that Arkansas State game when things were kind of getting off the rails a little bit. Senior Kane Williams, super senior Kane Williams, won his 99th career game. He became the program's all-time steals leader yesterday with 6, including that final steal there. The Panthers defense is just so locked in. Really, really made Norchair or Omir's day just awful and blocked a ton of his shots. That was another thing. The Panthers are really big on the front lines. Jalen Thomas and Elliot Olasemi just really cause a lot of problems. And if you're not ready for that physicality, and they went through multiple stretches where Arkansas State just could not get a clean look, tried to pound things in to Amir inside. Obviously, well-earned Sun Belt Player of the Year there. We saw what he did on Thursday night, just completely dominated in their opening, game. Really had a tougher time, last night. And I think that's, really in any level of basketball, if you can play great defense, which the Panthers certainly have in Sun Belt play, you have a chance. And I think we see that. I'm very interested to see if the Panthers can shoot better today from the field. If they do that, I agree with you. I think they do hit the gas pedal there against App State and even have an opportunity, because App State, we know they hoist 3-pointers. They, I think, are near or at the top of 3-point shots attempted in the league. They will shoot it. They've got guys, Forrest and Delph who will let it fly. But if they're not falling, and they certainly weren't falling last night against Georgia Southern, that game could be pretty interesting. But I agree with you. Overall sentiment. The games have been great so far. They've been close, down to the wire, and teams making clutch plays on both the men's and the women's side.
So Sun Belt Conference basketball will be over with on Monday night when the women play their championship game 1:00 on Monday. Men's game, I believe, is at 7:00 on Monday night. Then we get a little sneak peek there of the future members with Conference USA tipping off their tournament Tuesday night. Marshall will take on FIU as the 7th seed. Southern Miss, the 7th in the West seed, taking on UTSA. All that on ESPN Plus. Guys, these teams coming in for basketball, terrible. At least this year, at least. What are your thoughts on what we can really see out of this Conference USA tournament? Do you think that that's an indicator of what we're really getting, or is this just going through the motions to wrap up the season?
Yeah, it's difficult, right? When you're switching conferences, the mentality is different. At least with Conference USA, these guys will be competing for a title, as opposed to James Madison. We talked, about before what's going on there with them and the Colonial Athletic Association, which Georgia State knows all too well as they made that transition 2013 and 2014. But I definitely think these teams are going to have to, take steps forward and recruit a little better for Sun Belt play. Conference USA, unfortunately, in a lot of ways, is living off the reputation from probably 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. In a lot of ways, not to say there's good teams, there's good coaches in there, but as far as the league goes, it's been pretty rough. And to your point, adding, Southern Miss, adding Marshall, they don't tend to bring a lot, on the men's basketball side of things. And I'm interested to see if they can, grab a game win or two and try to advance and make things interesting. We know certainly anything can happen there on neutral court, but not looking for any of the future belt members there to hoist a trophy this week.
It's obviously springtime, so that means it's also baseball, softball season. Texas State continues to be the hot team, getting 2 of the 3-game series against number 11 Arizona in Tucson, Arizona. In addition to that, the Raging Cajuns wrapping up a 3-game series against Southern Miss in what is a top 30 contest. Cajuns didn't fare so well, though, as they fell 1 game to 2 games against Southern Miss. Early thoughts on baseball season?
Yeah, I'll start with the overall statement. Certainly for folks that are like I am, are waiting for the professionals to figure things out. It's a great time to go out and support college baseball. It's something that too, if you haven't seen it, I would encourage folks to go out and support local college baseball too. They need your support. It is a very different game than folks may see, even potentially late in the season. A lot of folks jump on college baseball when you're into the regionals, or even get on the ESPN in Omaha. But the weather's turning great all around the South and Southeast. I think it's a great time to certainly get out to a ballpark. But the Sun Belt has gotten some wins, as we've talked about the last few weeks here early in non-conference play and future conference play. I did have that circled. I was looking at it, kind of raised my eyes there at the Cajuns and Southern Miss getting after it, because the Cajuns have been traditionally very strong in baseball. With hosting regionals in recent years and been very, very good. Looking forward to see, the entire league as well as keeping an eye on the future belt as well. I know, here in the state of Georgia Southern, will play the big dogs, in Georgia and Georgia Tech. There's a lot of quality programs as well as Mercer and Kennesaw State. That both Georgia State and Georgia Southern will play as well, and to get to see some teams in. Georgia State, as we were cutting this, just wrapped up a 3-game sweep of Villanova, so not a bad weekend for the Panthers, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they can do in Brad Stromdahl's second season in Atlanta.
Yeah, looking ahead at baseball, you talked about getting out there. There's some big games this upcoming week. Louisiana Lafayette travels to Ruston, obviously to face Louisiana Tech, kind of the darlings of college baseball from last year when they hosted that regional. Wake Forest travels to Coastal Carolina. The game that I'm anxious about, but it doesn't seem like there's tickets, credentials, or anything else around in order to try to get in. Texas is headed to San Marcos. Texas, #1, able to go in over the weekend at Minute Maid Park in Houston, home of the Houston Astros. They won it all on the Shriner Classic, able to just run through every game that they had. So it'll be interesting to see how the Bobcats go when they're facing that flagship school in Texas. Shifting gears over to Conference USA, the future members, Marshall sitting at 9-4. Great stuff. Did drop the Saturday game, though, against Oakland in non-conference action, but able to dominate the other 2 games there. Old Dominion, 8-1 entering the day, 7-1 at home. They created Justin Verlander. And I know that's one guy, but that shows the caliber of players that are coming into the Sun Belt Conference and a team that I'm really excited about seeing. And then, of course, Southern Miss, as we had said, 7-3 entering Sunday. They did pick up a 7-1 win over Mississippi State this past week. James Madison, Chase DeLauder, the MLB top collegiate prospect, hitting .459, 3 home runs, 18 RBIs. They got James Madison at 7-4.
Yeah, may not. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on where you stand, you may not see DeLauder in Sun Belt play next season, as he's just a monster and a kid that can knock it at anywhere. But from the days I can speak from Georgia State side of things, when the Colonial is a very, very good league for baseball, and the state of Virginia produces a ton of talent as well. I expect ODU and James Madison to step right in and be able to compete right away. And you mentioned Jason Verlander, obviously with ODU, but quality programs up there, quality high school programs. You see their guys get drafted out of the state of Virginia consistently. If they can keep those guys home, they're going to be very solid moving forward in the Sun Belt.
Disappointing week in the week for softball as LSU downs a pair of Sun Belt Conference schools, shutting out Louisiana Lafayette 4-0 and 10-2 versus Troy. Louisiana Lafayette not winning those games that you would expect to. And I know everyone is that's not very familiar with Sun Belt Conference softball is not going to know. Those are the games that Louisiana Lafayette typically can win and win easily. Future Belt members, Southern Miss did get a huge win over number 4 Florida, 5-4. So the softball side of things are getting even bigger, better, faster, stronger as we go. With that said, though, James Madison struggling a little bit this year, 4-7 entering Sunday. The life after Odici Alexander not going so well for the Dukes.
No, and it's one of those scenarios too. I think softball is difficult because we've seen it be top heavy. You mentioned Louisiana, being a very quality program, and really you look up and down the standings as it, right now, a lot of teams taking losses up and down because they're playing, whether it's the midweek matchups with the in-state, high major Power 5 teams, or tournaments or things of that nature. Very interested to see who picks it up really in the next 2-3 weeks, as you get into end of March or April, and things really start kind of getting serious in the softball schedule. But yeah, I mean, even your ULM Warhawks are looking solid with that 13-5 mark there, Dusty. So gotta bring a smile to your face there.
Yeah, ULM softball definitely on the upswing and able to compete. It'll be interesting to see once they get into conference play how that holds up, but definitely doing the right things in non-conference play as well for right now. Shifting gears, Ben, we have football schedules, and they include 4 new members on there. All 3 of the Sun Belt Conference 3, I guess is what they're being unofficially referred to, filing the injunctions against Conference USA to disallow the mediation. I still don't understand exactly where we stand of how you can be on 2 different schedules, but hey, I like it. I love that they are making the effort to try to get out of Conference USA into the Sun Belt Conference.
Yeah, I don't think the coaches do either. I don't think to see what happens with these guys. Ultimately, who wins? We've talked about, the lawyers. You guys did a great job. The litigation. Conference USA, Sun Belt doesn't really have to include all of our newbies on our schedules. We see 6 division teams on the schedules, as well as 2 cross from opposite division. I am fascinated to see how it's going to play out. I imagine, the old Don Ohlmeyer quote, right? The answer to all your questions is money. I think something eventually will get worked out there, whether it's the buyouts we continue to hear reported, working out exit fees, et cetera. But I think it certainly sets up for a very exciting fall for sure. It was called, and a text that I got when the schedule came out. Basically, that Sun Belt East division looks like the SEC West.
Yeah, no doubt that we knew that Sun Belt East was going to be the strongest division in all of G5. Luckily, ULM sits in the West. The biggest complaint that I heard about the schedule coming out is that Louisiana Lafayette, ULM, the traditional battle for the boot, opening the gates for Sun Belt Conference play instead of being that traditional Thanksgiving Day game. Warhawks do get to maybe lay the foundation for a new rivalry game, as they will host Southern Miss for that traditional rivalry week slot. Out of the non-conference games, which one do you kind of have circled as your kind of go-to game that you're looking forward to?
App State's host North Carolina. We remember the last time the Mountaineers and the Tar Heels actually get 2 Sun Belt schools back to back. They got to travel to App State in week 1. And then week 2, they come to Georgia State. So it'll be interesting to compare some scores there, as both of those programs are getting a lot of looks potentially as programs that could, obviously App State has already ascended into the East. We know that they lost quite a bit, but hosting there. Fascinated to see what that looks like. There's a lot of great, honestly, Sun Belt and SEC matchups. Interested to see what Georgia Southern does under Clay Helton, and seeing what they have to do in terms of scheduling. I think there is the potential for a few Power 5 upsets, as we see every year in September timeframe. And I think that the more we know, especially even with the transfer portal not completely done, as we know, as spring practice is still ongoing, except for the case of Coastal Carolina, where they have just wrapped theirs up. But there's going to be guys in the portal that absolutely could be impact players for Sun Belt teams in the next 2, 3, 4 months that we may not even know as of today. So I think there are opportunities for several Sun Belt schools. And I'm very interested to see as well, what's the remnants of Louisiana as well, Louisiana Lafayette. We know how many folks they lost. They got a date in November playing against Florida State. Florida State, we know, has been struggling as well. So there's guys on that Louisiana team that have won a lot of games. Interested to see that. That's kind of one that I had in my eyeball on. How about you?
I'm interested to see a couple of different games. Marshall travels to Notre Dame. Always interested to see how you go against the big boys, so to say, the Power 5. Plus, I really like that Marshall team, especially with all the components that are returning from last year's team. The running back, whose name escapes me, that is just faster than anything and a great running back as a whole. I think Thunder and Herd have a good shot in that game. Additionally, Liberty is going to play two of the new guys as well, as they play Old Dominion and Southern Miss. always interested to see kind of how Liberty is after the Malik Willis experiment and see how Hugh Freeze rebounds and rebuilds that team as they get ready to make that jump into Conference USA.
Yeah, and a Conference USA, as we know, has been ravaged. It is one certainly to be won potentially by Liberty and the Flames. And we know Hugh Freeze is a offensive guru. I'm sure he'll have a quarterback in the wings there, or at the very least, as we know, Malik Willis was a transfer portal guy coming from Auburn, so he may be looking into the portal again here in the coming weeks to find his next Malik Willis.
I am also interested to see James Madison's debut as a FBS program when they host Middle Tennessee there on Liberty weekend. I honestly don't know what to expect of that game because while James Madison has had good talent, they have not always had to face the P5s or the D1 programs like a Middle Tennessee, Western, or the Sun Belt Conference. So how do they even match up with there, let alone opening the gates for Sun Belt Conference play against Middle Tennessee, the former Sun Belt Conference member?
Yeah, and it's going to be a grind. I mean, too, the toughest thing specifically from transitioning from FCS to FBS is trying to regulate and find out as well, because you can split scholarships. You can have partial scholarships in the FCS. You can't have that in FBS. So you have to figure out, all right, so guys that may be on split scholarships, who's going to become a full, who we may have to part with and become a walk-on or maybe boot out of the program. They may not like that. They also have to, worry about roster management as well. We've talked about the portal a couple of times, and we'll probably continue to talk about it over the next weeks, months, as far as we go here. But, I think it's going to be very interesting to see how they're constructed as well, because they're used to playing other teams that have, 63 scholarships. Now everybody's got, 80, basically, in that neighborhood of 85, have the ability to have as many as 85. It is a transition. It can wear on teams. We've seen App State, took a little bit of a rough road to start. Georgia Southern, when they came into the league, they redshirted a lot of their upperclassmen in preparation for, to make that jump in the FBS. And we saw how that paid off for them there and kind of growing. But we know they're obviously in a talented area. The state of Virginia produces a great amount. And they have also, I've seen offers, and I'm sure probably you have it as well, gone all over the place. They've been firing offers all over now that they are obviously officially in the Sun Belt, being able to kind of plant that flag and go and get out and get into the high schools and get some guys that still may be out there that didn't sign in the February signing period.
The one game I'm really not looking forward to, because the Sun Belt has not had a FCS loss in at least the last 4 or 5 years. The opener for the Raging Cajuns against Southeastern Louisiana, that's a stacked team that's got a lot of P5 transfers. Frank Selfo constantly trying to remind people, especially in the state of Louisiana, that he's around, and the fact that he hasn't been seriously considered for some of these other jobs that have opened up around the state or even the region. I think they're going to be gunning for the Raging Cajuns, and then the Raging Cajuns still got to find themselves in that week one under the new head coach, Mike DeZormo, his realm of taking over the program, and they lost a lot of talent. So it's the perfect storm that we could see that FCS upset of a Sun Belt Conference team.
It definitely has all the makings, and I think if you're going to get the Cajuns too early is probably better, just because there's so many new faces. There's so many. We've talked about it, and Jay Walker talked about it, and we talked to him that how many seniors were on this team. I think they lost 20 plus seniors, replacing quarterback. Anytime too you have a new head coach, there's going to be a little bit of a transitional period from a play calling, from a play design, from a play. Things are going to be different. Every coach wants to put their own stamp on the program as well, and that's game one. And as you mentioned, there is quality transfers coming as well. I know they picked off Kyle Edwards, who was at the University of Alabama down there, Southeastern Louisiana, transferred there, came back home. There is quite a few FBS and even Power 5 transfers on that roster. So it's not just what Coach Prime is doing there at Jackson State. More programs down in the Bayou are looking at trying to land and hit home runs too. I definitely be careful there, Cajuns, because that has kind of all the makings, as you said, for an upset there.
Another cringeworthy moment there that I could see playing out. South Alabama opens up against Nicholls State. Tim Rebo's done a great job rebuilding the Colonels down there. Then in week 2, they go to ULM. And ULM, of course, will still be trying to find themselves and figure out what they're doing under what's really the first full recruiting cycle, full season under head coach Terry Bowden. The Colonels might go 2-0 in the Sun Belt Conference. Yeah, that would be something. I remind folks, man, they had Georgia beat, just a couple of years ago in Athens when Kirby Smart's, I think, third year. That was a 19-16 game. So we know certainly the Jags will play very good defense. They have some things to figure out, but they do have their quarterback back. It's going to be intriguing to see the Jags in year 2 under Kane Womack. And you're right, man. I mean, it's the most impressive thing, as I kept telling people too. I mean, ULM knocking off, that was one thing that we had talked about for a while. Hey, ULM, they're facing Jackson State. They knocked them off. So I'm going to have to knock off a quality FCS opponent for a second straight season. And I know the rest of the league will be certainly rooting for them. So, Ben, a short, sweet episode, just the two of us talking Sun Belt Conference basketball, football, and everything in between. Promos, plugs, parting shots. What do you have there, Ben?
Yeah, man. It's spring practice is still ongoing for the Panthers, but of course we talked about basketball, and we are at basketball school here in Atlanta, as I'm reminded constantly. Georgia State plays this eve. Shortly after we'll be cutting this recording, they'll play tonight, and depending on what happens, maybe playing for the Sun Belt tournament title yet again on Monday night. That is certainly the goal. We'll have it covered top to bottom, side to side, as well as covering the upcoming Georgia State spring game in April, going through some positional breakdowns and all that good stuff, continuing to cover recruiting, and looking forward to the 13th year of Georgia State football, which is still crazy to me that we're there already. But cover it and check it out, PantherTalk.com.
BoarHawkReport.com, still having an active message board discussing various things from strategic planning of athletics and academics, talking about baseball, losers now of 8 straight, and what will it take for the Warhawk baseball team to get back on top and in the winning ways ahead of Sun Belt Conference action starting just over a week away. Time flies when you're having fun. Other than that, Ben, been another great week, and looking forward to next week when we get to talk about the NCAA and NIT brackets coming out involving Sun Belt Conference teams.
It will be Selection Sunday, one of my favorite days on the calendar.